Welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we are covering a story that should send chills down the spine of every American who believes in constitutional rights. Federal immigration agents are showing up at the homes of legal observers in Minnesota, people whose only crime is watching and documenting government activity in public spaces.
And I'm Maya Clarity. That's right, Alex. We're talking about immigration and customs enforcement and customs and border protection agents identifying legal observers by name and home address, and in some cases physically appearing at their doorsteps. The message couldn't be clearer: we know who you are, we know where you live, and we want you to stop watching us.
We've also got international stories tonight that connect to a broader theme of accountability and political power. In the Philippines, the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte Carpio is advancing through the House of Representatives, raising critical questions about political dynasties and the rule of law in Southeast Asia. And in Hong Kong, a sitting lawmaker has been charged after being filmed driving on the wrong side of the road, a small story that actually tells us a lot about accountability for the powerful.
But we're leading tonight with Minnesota, because what's happening there is a direct assault on the legal infrastructure that protects immigrants' rights. Legal observers exist for one reason: to ensure that government agents follow the law during enforcement operations. When you intimidate the people watching the watchers, you're telling the world you don't want anyone to see what you're doing.
And that should terrify everyone, regardless of where you stand on immigration policy. So let's get into it. Tonight's Truth Report starts now.
Let's go straight to our lead story. The Intercept is reporting today, March 5, 2026, that immigration authorities in Minnesota have been conducting what can only be described as a systematic intimidation campaign against legal observers. These are typically volunteers affiliated with civil rights organizations, lawyers, and community members who monitor ICE and CBP operations to document whether agents are following proper legal procedures.
And let's be absolutely clear about what a legal observer does. They stand in public spaces. They take notes. They sometimes record video. They do not interfere with law enforcement operations. Their entire function is protected under the First Amendment, the same amendment that protects journalists, protesters, and anyone who wants to watch their government in action. Courts have affirmed this right repeatedly.
What the Intercept is reporting is that these observers have been identified by name and address by federal immigration authorities. Think about what that means operationally. Someone within ICE or CBP is running the identities of civilians who are engaged in constitutionally protected activity. They're pulling home addresses. And then, in some cases, agents are physically showing up at those homes.
The quote from the headline says it all: they know where you live. That is not law enforcement. That is intimidation, pure and simple. When a government agent shows up at your home not because you've committed a crime, not because they have a warrant, not because they have any legal basis whatsoever, but because you watch them do their job in public, that is the behavior of an authoritarian state.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum, Alex. This is part of a broader pattern we've been tracking on this show for months. Since the beginning of 2026, we've seen an escalation in tactics by federal immigration authorities that go far beyond the stated mission of enforcing immigration law. We've seen raids at courthouses, operations near schools and churches, places that were traditionally considered sensitive locations and off-limits for enforcement.
Right, the sensitive locations policy that had been in place under multiple administrations was rescinded, and we warned at the time that removing those guardrails would lead to exactly this kind of mission creep. When you tell agents they can operate anywhere, and you remove the oversight mechanisms that keep them accountable, you get agents who believe they can do anything to anyone, including targeting the people who are trying to hold them accountable.
Let's talk about who these legal observers are in Minnesota specifically. These are community members, many of them affiliated with organizations that provide Know Your Rights training to immigrant communities. Some are immigration attorneys. Some are law students. Some are members of faith communities who believe they have a moral obligation to bear witness. None of them are criminals. None of them are obstructing justice. They are exercising their constitutional rights.
And the chilling effect of this kind of intimidation cannot be overstated. When you show up at someone's home, you're not just sending a message to that individual. You're sending a message to every person who has ever considered volunteering as a legal observer. You're saying, if you watch us, we will find out who you are, and we will come to your home. How many people are going to sign up for that?
That's exactly the point, isn't it? This is designed to clear the field of witnesses. If there are no legal observers present during ICE operations, there's no one to document when agents violate constitutional protections. There's no one to record when agents enter homes without warrants. There's no one to witness when agents detain people without proper legal authority. The intimidation of observers is a precondition for lawlessness.
And let's connect this to what we know about ICE operations in Minnesota specifically. Minnesota has a significant immigrant population, including large Somali, Hmong, and Latino communities. These communities have been on edge for months as enforcement operations have intensified. Legal observers have been one of the few sources of reliable information about what's actually happening during these operations.
According to the Intercept's reporting, the fact that authorities have identified observers by name and address suggests a level of surveillance infrastructure that goes well beyond routine law enforcement. Someone is running license plates, cross-referencing social media, possibly using facial recognition technology. The question we should all be asking is, under what legal authority are federal immigration agents conducting surveillance on American citizens and legal residents who are engaged in constitutionally protected activity?
That's the critical question. Because if ICE and CBP are building dossiers on legal observers, what else are they doing? Are they tracking immigration attorneys? Are they monitoring community organizations? Are they surveilling churches that provide sanctuary? The tools of mass surveillance don't respect boundaries, and once you normalize targeting one group of constitutionally protected actors, the scope inevitably expands.
And I want to emphasize something about the legal framework here. The right to observe government activity in public spaces is deeply rooted in First Amendment jurisprudence. Federal courts across the country have affirmed that citizens have the right to record police activity, to observe government operations in public, and to document the exercise of state power. What ICE and CBP are doing in Minnesota is not just morally wrong. It may well be unconstitutional.
The ACLU and other civil liberties organizations have been sounding the alarm about this kind of behavior for years. But what's striking about the Intercept's reporting is how brazen it has become. These agents aren't hiding what they're doing. They're showing up at people's homes in broad daylight. They want the observers to know they're being watched. The intimidation is the point.
So who benefits from this? Obviously, federal immigration authorities benefit from operating without oversight. When there are no witnesses, there are no accountability mechanisms. But let's think bigger. Who benefits politically from an immigration enforcement apparatus that operates without constitutional constraints? Who benefits from immigrant communities living in such fear that they don't go to work, don't take their children to school, don't seek medical care?
It's a political strategy, Maya. Fear is the product. When immigrant communities are terrorized, it serves a political narrative that the government is being tough on immigration. The actual policy outcomes, whether people are actually deported, whether the immigration system is actually reformed, those are secondary to the theater of enforcement. And legal observers threaten that theater because they document the reality, which often doesn't match the narrative.
And let's talk about what this means for the rule of law more broadly. When government agents can intimidate the people who monitor their activities, we've crossed a line that separates democratic governance from something much darker. Every authoritarian regime in history has targeted watchdog organizations, journalists, legal observers, and human rights monitors. The playbook is always the same: identify them, intimidate them, and then operate in the darkness.
Now let's turn to our international stories, because there's a fascinating thread connecting what's happening in Minnesota to political dynamics halfway around the world. In the Philippines, the House of Representatives has advanced 2 impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte Carpio, moving the case one step closer to formal proceedings.
For those who aren't following Philippine politics, Sara Duterte Carpio is the daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, who is himself facing charges at the International Criminal Court for his brutal drug war that killed thousands. Sara was elected vice president in 2022 on a unity ticket with current President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., but that alliance has since collapsed, and the two camps are now bitter political rivals.
According to the South China Morning Post, the House Justice Committee has advanced these impeachment complaints, which could threaten Duterte Carpio's political future as a potential contender for the presidency in 2028. But here's where it gets strategically interesting: the process carries political risks for both sides. Some lawmakers are arguing that if the Senate ultimately fails to convict, it could actually strengthen Duterte Carpio heading into the 2028 race.
That's a calculated gamble. The Marcos camp is betting that putting Duterte Carpio through an impeachment trial will damage her politically. But the Duterte camp may be calculating that surviving an impeachment could make her look like a political martyr, someone persecuted by the establishment who emerged stronger. We've seen that playbook work in other countries, haven't we, Alex?
The parallels to American politics are hard to miss. But let's focus on what this means for the Philippines. The Duterte political dynasty represents a particular brand of populist authoritarianism. Rodrigo Duterte's drug war resulted in thousands of extrajudicial killings. Human rights organizations documented widespread abuses. And Sara Duterte Carpio has never meaningfully distanced herself from her father's legacy. In fact, she's leveraged it as a political asset.
The impeachment complaints reportedly center on issues of financial accountability and abuse of power. The House Justice Committee is examining whether Duterte Carpio misused confidential funds during her time as Education Secretary. This isn't just about political rivalries. It's about whether public money was diverted for personal or political purposes, and whether the vice president can be held accountable through constitutional mechanisms.
And that word, accountability, is the thread that connects this story to everything else we're covering tonight. In Minnesota, the question is whether immigration agents can be held accountable when they intimidate civilians. In the Philippines, the question is whether a vice president from a powerful political dynasty can be held accountable for alleged financial misconduct. In both cases, the fundamental issue is the same: does the rule of law apply to the powerful?
The drawn-out nature of the impeachment process is itself significant. Philippine impeachment proceedings are constitutionally complex, requiring multiple steps through the House before reaching the Senate for trial. This is not a cakewalk, as the South China Morning Post headline puts it. And the political maneuvering around the process reveals how accountability mechanisms can be weaponized or undermined by competing factions.
What's particularly relevant for our audience is the immigration dimension of Philippine politics. The Philippines is one of the largest sources of immigrants to the United States. The Filipino-American community numbers over 4 million people. Political instability in the Philippines, whether through impeachment crises or authoritarian governance, directly impacts migration patterns and the Filipino diaspora.
And the Duterte legacy looms large over Filipino immigrant communities. Many Filipino Americans fled or left during the elder Duterte's presidency, driven by the climate of fear created by the drug war. The question of whether Sara Duterte Carpio could ascend to the presidency in 2028 is not just a Philippine domestic issue. It's a question that resonates deeply in Filipino communities across the United States.
Now let's turn to our third story, which on the surface might seem like a minor traffic incident, but actually illuminates something important about how the powerful are treated when they break the rules. In Hong Kong, lawmaker Judy Chan of the New People's Party has been charged with careless driving after she was filmed driving on the wrong side of Jaffe Road in Wan Chai on January 23.
According to the South China Morning Post, police confirmed they served a summons to prosecute a local female driver for careless driving after she allegedly drove against the flow of traffic. It was subsequently identified that the driver was Chan, who represents Hong Kong Island West in the Legislative Council. The incident was caught on camera, which is what makes this story particularly interesting from an accountability standpoint.
Here's what I find notable about this story, Maya. It took more than a month from the incident on January 23 to the filing of charges. Now, if an ordinary person in Hong Kong were filmed driving on the wrong side of a major road in Wan Chai, one of the busiest commercial districts in the territory, how quickly do you think charges would be filed? The delay itself raises questions about whether political status influenced the timeline.
That's a fair question. Careless driving in Hong Kong can result in a fine and up to 12 months imprisonment for a first offense. The fact that a sitting lawmaker was driving against traffic on a major road is inherently newsworthy. But the broader context matters too. Under Hong Kong's current political system, which has been dramatically restructured since the 2020 National Security Law, the Legislative Council is populated almost exclusively by what Beijing considers patriotic lawmakers.
Chan's New People's Party was founded by Regina Ip, one of Hong Kong's most prominent pro-Beijing politicians. So while this traffic charge is being processed through normal legal channels, it exists within a political ecosystem where the lines between the government, the legislature, and the judiciary have become increasingly blurred. The question isn't just whether Chan will face consequences for careless driving. It's whether Hong Kong's legal system treats the politically connected the same as everyone else.
And that connects directly to our theme tonight. Whether we're talking about ICE agents in Minnesota, political dynasties in the Philippines, or lawmakers in Hong Kong, the fundamental question is the same: is anyone truly accountable? Do the rules apply equally? Or is there one system for the powerful and another for everyone else?
In the immigration context, this question is especially urgent. Immigrants in the United States are subject to an enforcement system that operates with minimal judicial oversight. Immigration courts are part of the executive branch, not the judiciary. Immigrants often lack legal representation. And as we've been reporting, the people who try to ensure that even this flawed system follows its own rules, the legal observers, are now being targeted for intimidation.
Let's pull all of these stories together now, because the pattern is unmistakable. We're seeing a global erosion of accountability mechanisms. In Minnesota, federal agents are intimidating the civilians who monitor their operations. In the Philippines, impeachment proceedings are being navigated as political chess moves rather than genuine accountability exercises. In Hong Kong, the question of whether a lawmaker faces the same justice as an ordinary citizen plays out against the backdrop of an increasingly authoritarian political system.
And in every single case, the people who suffer most are the most vulnerable. In Minnesota, it's immigrant communities who lose the protection that legal observers provide. In the Philippines, it's ordinary citizens who suffer under political dynasties that operate above the law. In Hong Kong, it's the erosion of the rule of law that affects everyone who isn't politically connected.
The immigration angle ties all of this together more tightly than you might think. The United States is home to millions of immigrants from the Philippines and Hong Kong. The political conditions in those places directly drive migration. And the treatment those immigrants receive when they arrive in the United States, the enforcement operations, the legal protections or lack thereof, the presence or absence of legal observers, that's all part of the same system.
What we're witnessing is not a series of isolated incidents. It's a pattern. When governments want to exercise power without accountability, they follow a predictable sequence. First, they remove formal oversight mechanisms. Then they intimidate informal accountability structures, the observers, the journalists, the watchdog organizations. And finally, they operate in the darkness, knowing that no one is watching and no one will document what they do.
In the United States, we've seen all three stages playing out in immigration enforcement. Formal oversight has been weakened through policy changes and budget cuts to inspectors general. Informal accountability is being attacked through the intimidation of legal observers that the Intercept is reporting on today. And in communities across the country, ICE operations are happening with increasingly little transparency or documentation.
So what can people do? First, know your rights. If you're a legal observer, the First Amendment protects your right to observe and document government activity in public spaces. If agents show up at your home, you are under no obligation to speak with them. You have the right to an attorney. Document everything.
Second, support the organizations that are doing this work. Legal observer programs need volunteers, funding, and legal backing. The ACLU, the National Lawyers Guild, and local immigrant rights organizations are on the front lines. They need resources, especially as the intimidation campaign escalates.
Third, demand accountability from your elected representatives. Federal agents who show up at civilians' homes to intimidate them for exercising constitutional rights are abusing their authority. Congressional oversight committees need to investigate these incidents. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General needs to be involved. This is not a partisan issue. This is a constitutional issue.
And fourth, pay attention. The stories we've covered tonight from Minnesota, the Philippines, and Hong Kong may seem disconnected, but they're all manifestations of the same struggle. The struggle between those who believe power should be exercised in the open, subject to accountability, and those who believe power works best in the dark, without witnesses.
The targeting of legal observers in Minnesota is a canary in the coal mine. If the government can intimidate the people who watch, it can do anything to the people who can't watch for themselves. Immigrant communities know this. They live it every day. The question is whether the rest of us are paying attention before it's too late.
That's the heart of it. Legal observers exist because immigrants are vulnerable. They're vulnerable to agents who might enter homes without warrants, who might detain people without proper authority, who might use excessive force without consequence. When you remove the observers, you don't remove the vulnerability. You amplify it.
And the international stories we covered tonight remind us that this is not uniquely American. The Philippines' struggle with political dynasties and accountability, Hong Kong's evolving relationship with the rule of law, these are all part of a global conversation about whether democratic institutions can withstand the concentration of power in fewer and fewer hands.
The through line is transparency. In a functioning democracy, the government operates in the light. Its agents follow the law. Its politicians face consequences when they break the rules. Its citizens have the right to watch, to document, to speak. When any of those elements are compromised, the entire system is at risk.
We started tonight with a quote from the Intercept's reporting, "They know where you live." That's meant to be a threat. But here's what I want to say to every legal observer, every immigrant rights advocate, every person who has ever stood on a sidewalk with a clipboard or a phone camera to document what their government is doing. They may know where you live, but you know what they're doing. And that's why they're afraid of you.
The powerful don't intimidate people who are irrelevant. They intimidate people who are effective. The fact that ICE and CBP are targeting legal observers tells you everything you need to know about how important that work is. Don't stop. Don't be afraid. And know that there are organizations, attorneys, and communities that will stand with you.
That's our show for tonight. I'm Alex Truth. The stories we covered today are sourced from the Intercept's reporting on federal agent intimidation in Minnesota, the South China Morning Post's coverage of the Sara Duterte impeachment proceedings in the Philippines, and the South China Morning Post's reporting on Hong Kong lawmaker Judy Chan's traffic charges. All links are in the show notes.
I'm Maya Clarity. If anything we reported tonight concerns you, good. It should. Share this episode. Talk to your neighbors. Call your representatives. The truth doesn't report itself, and democracy doesn't defend itself. We'll see you next time on Truth Report.
Stay informed. Stay vigilant. And remember, the truth doesn't take sides, but it does take courage.